We are obliged by law to decide all applications in accordance with the policies in the local development plan, unless material considerations indicate otherwise. The local development plan may include the County Council's minerals or waste plan, the appropriate any borough, district or neighbourhood plan for the area concerned. In addition, the National Planning Policy Framework issued by the Government lays down a presumption in favour of granting permission. This presumption means that an application that records with an up-to-date development plan will usually be granted. And if there are no relevant development plan policies or the important policies are out of date, the committee must find clear reasons in the framework to justify a refusal. The courts have laid down what can and cannot be material planning considerations, and any decision must be based on valid planning reasons backed by the evidence. If an application is refused without such reasons, the result can be a legal challenge which takes the decision out of our hands and incurs substantial legal costs for the council and the council taxpayer. Now, before we start considering the application today, the committee has a few legal and housekeeping matters to deal with. Number one, are there any apologies? I don't think there are. I think everybody's here, which is good news. Can I have any members' declarations of pecuniary and non-pecuniary interests, please? Ooh, that's good. And the next one is item 3 is minutes of the meeting of the 8th of June 2021. Is it your wish that, can I ask Councillor Matetsky, you raised a point on the accuracy of the minutes. Would you like to do so now?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So on page 9 of our pack, which is page 5 of the minutes, on the third paragraph down, it says a vote was held and there were 4 votes in favour of the application. I'd like to say that there were actually 5 votes in favour of the application. There were 9 members at the committee, 5 voted for it, 2 abstained and 2 were against.
Okay, thank you. With that correction, do we agree that these minutes reflect a true and accurate record? Those in favour, please show. Thank you. Now, item 2 on our agendas this morning are delegated decisions. They have been circulated to you. Do we agree to note those, please? Do you show? Thank you. And next, we get on to the principal attraction of the morning. And that's number 3, planning application RBC 20CM014, regrading of land off Newton Road in Rugby. Sally, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, everyone. The application is for relates to land at Coton Farm, which is located northeast of Rugby. The application site is a field with an area of 3 hectares in size. The field itself is located in red on the slide here. It's positioned to the north of the M6 and west of the A5 Watling Street. And the application site is actually 1.5 kilometres north of the village of Newton, which is seen on the slide here. The nearest residential property, if I just go slightly further in, is just to the east of the application site here. And going closer in, sorry if I just, there's a property called the Three Bridges, which used to be called the Homestead, located to the northeast of the application site. The proposal is for the regrading of the field, which is edged here in red. It requires the import of topsoil as inert waste to regrade the field surface from a sloping site to which currently has a dished profile to a more level gradient. The applicant wishes to return the field to a more productive agricultural use. If I just show you the agricultural holding on the next slide is outlined in blue and the application site there is in red. The geology of this area and the wider area is one of sand and gravel deposits over clay. As a result, it's a site of historic sand and gravel extraction, which on this site has had some gravel extraction, although there's been little or no restoration. There is no planning history, however, of that extraction. The field is currently fallow, and the surrounding fields are used. If I just go back a couple of photos, you can see the sort of square images on the side here. It's currently used for raising pheasants. To regrade the land to a more horizontal level would require 91,000 cubic metres of topsoil. That's 136,410 tonnes of topsoil. The proposal would use a 20-tonne capacity vehicle, calculating at 1 tonne of soil, topsoil equates to 0.67 of a cubic metre. The regrading would require approximately 6,800 vehicle movements, HDV deliveries. Working Monday to Friday with an average of 13 deliveries a day, that would be 26 two-way movements. The operation would require a 2-year period to complete. The works to set up the site, if I just go on a couple of slides, this is showing the application site. It would require the opening of an access. This is Newton Lane, and a field access would be opened at this point. There is an old field access there that hasn't been used for a number of years and is currently overgrown. That access point would need to be increased in width to 5.5 metres to allow 2 HGVs to pass. The site would be secured by a gate set back some 15 metres from the highway. That would ensure that a 20-tonne tipper truck could pull off the highway and wouldn't block Newton Lane at that point if the gates were closed. A site compound would need to be constructed to provide a parking area, a turning area for HGVs to allow them to enter and exit the site in a forward gear, a wheel wash facility, and a mess or a welfare cabin. To achieve the correct sight lines into the site, if I can just go on to the next slide. Sorry, this is fairly faint to see, but in green there on to the left image, it shows the sight lines required for that access. There's a distance of 215 metres, and to achieve that for the HGVs, the existing hedge height would need to be reduced to 0.6 of a metre to allow that visibility. The regrading operation would import topsoil from a storage yard called the Fisheries. This site is located approximately 1.7 kilometres to the southeast on the A5. Vehicles would travel. I'm just going to go forward on my slide slightly because I've got one that's showing the location. On this slide, the starred location is showing the Fisheries. Vehicles would travel via Watling Street, the A5, northwards from the Fisheries, turning left into Newton Lane, and then right from Newton Lane into the application site. Land raising would commence at the southwestern area of the site. If I go forward again. So we'll come into this, start filling at this southwestern area of the site and work towards the site access. The 20 tipper lorries would deliver the soil. It would be tipped onto site and would be graded and placed in site by bulldozers. The surface would be compacted by a smooth roller pulled by the bulldozer to provide a compact surface to allow lorry traffic to travel over it. On completion, an excavator and grading bucket would be used to create the final landform, and then the surface would be ripped to ensure excess compaction is removed to allow it to be used for an agricultural purpose. The regrading is proposed to create a more level field. As I say, at the moment there is quite a dish profile, and I'll show you that in my photos presently. Ground levels at the northern edge of the site. There's actually a drainage ditch, along this northern edge. And you can see here the contours showing there would be an increase in height at this point between the slope and the level surface of 4.5 metres, and that grades back as a generally level surface to the southern boundary of the site where it meets the existing ground levels.
Sorry, could you just repeat that?
Yes, certainly. So there's a drainage channel on that northern boundary. The field would be graded to create a largely horizontal surface in this area where it's flat without the contour lines. And then there would be an embankment on that northern edge to a height of 4.5 metres. So it's a 1 in 3 slope between the drainage ditch and the level surface of the field. That distance is about 13 metres between the drainage ditch and the top of that slope. There'd also be a similar slope on this western edge, again as it just grades through to the existing ground levels on the other side to the field to the west. Drainage would generally be slowly across south to north, draining south to north, but predominantly drainage would then be across from west to east, and there'd be a swale constructed on this eastern boundary, which would then take surface water into the drainage ditch along the northern boundary. It's probably useful at this stage just to take you through some photos, and then I'll go back to go through the issues. There were sections provided to show the cut and fill of the deposits. This is two sections running west to east. So Newton Lane is on this side, on the eastern side, and you can see a generally level form of surface being created. These two sections run from south to north, and here you can see that embankment on the northern side. The ditch is in this location. Again, as I say, showing a level surface here with the drop-off at the end, a 1 in 3 slope. Along the eastern boundary is this section. Sorry, I keep pressing on the button. Beg pardon. This is the section through the swale, and it's showing the surface water drained from south to north, and that links into the drainage ditch which runs along the northern boundary. There are sections through the swale to show that there are several dams located to ensure the surface flow is northwards. If I just take you through a few photos, I've basically stood at various points to take a panoramic view looking across. So at this point I'm stood in the south eastern corner of the site. Not the proposed access, there's another access point which won't be used. I'm stood in the corner of the field, and here I'm looking directly west. You can see here there's a building in the distance that is to be retained, that won't be impacted. If I take the views, then I'm scanning across the field, and you can see the difference in levels. These photos were taken in December last year. And this is showing the hollow, and actually if you can see in this section here, it's actually much deeper, dropping away the ground level, so that's the point where it's actually very poorly drained. The drainage ditch along the northern boundary is in this location, and I was there, this is slightly further along, walking along that northern boundary. The trees on the far side aren't within the application site, they're covered by a tree preservation order. And again, now I'm stood in the opposite corner of the field, looking on that western end of the drainage ditch, looking back towards Newton Lane and scanning across the field. That's the tree boundary along the northern edge. And again, you can see the difference in levels here, looking across the site. The buildings that are to be retained on site, they won't be impacted. They're derelict farm buildings. And again, looking across the dished profile of that field. The hedge line, this is along that southern boundary, and you can see a hedge line along Newton Lane in the distance. I went out on site again last week before, just to show what it's currently looking like. It's still fallow and it's rudderell vegetation there at present. This is the access point, which is overgrown and would be reopened. And this is the view onto Newton Lane. If I can just then go back and I'll take you through the issues with this application. We have received objections from Churchover Parish Council and from a local resident living close to the site. Newton and Big Inn Parish Council have made representations, not an objection. Ian Davis, the chair of the Parish Council, has submitted a statement which Matthew's going to read as Mr Davis has been unable to attend the meeting today. The concerns raised by consultations are the impact on amenity, noise and disturbance from the regrading, a question over the quality and volume of material to be imported, the source of the topsoil coming from the fisheries, and traffic issues and the control of routing from the fisheries to the application site. If I go through first the impact on amenity and noise, the operation would be a source of disturbance. Lorries were delivered to the site for a 2-year period to complete the regrading. The application indicated on average 13 lorries per day would be required. It's actually likely that there would be a greater number of deliveries taking place during drier periods of weather or the summer months. And a condition is recommended for there to be a maximum of 20 vehicles per day. That's 40 movements to ensure that those summer months aren't have too many vehicles arriving. Noise would potentially be from vehicles grading the soil deposits. Rugby Borough Council environmental health officers raised no objections subject to conditions, and those are relating to ensuring that reversing alarms on vehicles are controlled, and a condition for the hours of operation, which are indicated to be 7:30 till 6 Monday to Friday and 8:30 till 1 on a Saturday, with no operating on Sundays or bank holidays. There are also conditions relating to the control of dust generated on site. In terms of the volume and quality of material to be imported, concern and objection has come from the parish councils on the volume of material, as it is indicated to be up to 7 metres in depth. The regrading is proposed to create a more level field. To achieve the proposed profile, the depth would be a maximum of 7 metres, and that's at the point of the deepest hollow in the field, so it's only in a small number of locations that it would reach the 7 metres. The site has been previously excavated, apparently without any restoration, and the import of soils to raise and level the ground to increase productivity of the field is a legitimate reason for the proposed operation. The use of recycled topsoil is an appropriate use, moving waste up the waste hierarchy. In terms of the quality of the material imported, the applicant has made it clear that it would not be in his interest of the use of the land for agriculture to import anything other than topsoils to the site. The regrading operation at the farm would require a permit from the Environment Agency, and part of the permit requirement would be to control the quality of material delivered. In terms of the source of the topsoil from the fisheries, the concerns that were raised there. The fisheries is a site that receives and sorts waste, for example, from the local construction industry. The site operates with planning approval to process and store inert waste. And the export of sorted waste is, in this case, screened topsoils, would be a legitimate function of that operation. The fishery site currently has an excessive store of material on the bunds that on the site, surrounding the site, which are currently too high. Enforcement action is being taken and enforcement notice has been served to resolve the issues on site. However, there is an appeal currently lodged on the grounds that, a couple of grounds actually, but including that there's insufficient time for the resolution of the reduction in height of the bunds. Planning breaches at the fisheries wouldn't be a reason to refuse consent at Coton Farm. Concern has also been expressed by the parish councils as to whether there is enough topsoil at the fisheries to meet the requirement at Coton Farm to complete the levelling. The fisheries does have an excess of material at present, and the business does continually receive waste materials, and therefore it doesn't actually need to currently hold the required amount. It's a continuing operation, so there would, over that 2-year period, be an import of materials to the fisheries. It is recommended, though, a condition to ensure that the materials only come from the fisheries so that there's control over the routing of vehicles to ensure that the material is only coming via the A5 and Newton Lane and not coming from other supplies of topsoil elsewhere in the county. In terms of the traffic and routing of vehicles to and from the fisheries, neither Highways England nor Warwickshire County Council Highways, as the Highway Authority for Newton Lane itself, have objected to the proposal. Highways England required sightlines on the A5 to be maintained. That's not something actually that the applicant can do himself or we could enforce to be done. Highways England had recommended a condition, and we've discussed that with them, and with Ian's help we've discussed a changed wording that Highways England were happy with, that there's an agreement between the applicant and Highways England to ensure that works are undertaken to ensure sightlines there. Our own highways, Warwickshire County Council Highways, similarly require sightlines to be secured for the site access, which would, as I say previously, require the hedge height to be reduced to 0.6 of a metre. Concern has been expressed by Newton and Biggin Parish Council about the routing of HGV, particularly to ensure that it doesn't go through Newton Village to the south of the site. The village has a 90-degree bend that HGVs have trouble negotiating. They can't get through that very easily at all. Warwickshire County Council Highway Safety Team are currently in the process of erecting signs at the junction of Newton Lane and to the south of Newton Village, to signs saying no access for HGVs from the A5. Also, Newton Lane has a 7.5 tonne weight limit with limited access, so vehicles would be able to access as far as the application site legitimately, but shouldn't go beyond. The construction management plan submitted with the application shows the routing of vehicles only coming via Newton Lane and the A5. And a condition is recommended for vehicles only to enter and exit in the required direction and not to travel south via Newton Lane. The condition also recommends that signs be erected on the site to ensure that drivers leaving the site travel in the right direction, don't take a shortcut via Newton. Mud on the road has been raised as an issue potentially, and both Highways England and our own Highway Authority both require a condition to prevent mud on the highway. The application as submitted proposed a hardcore internal access road with a wheel wash facility. Our concern there was to ensure that the surface of the internal haul road is adequate to allow a road sweeper to operate, to ensure that the stretcher road between the wheel wash and the entrance exit is kept clean. For that reason, notwithstanding the details as submitted, we're requiring a condition or recommending a condition to ensure the road between the entrance and the wheel wash is either concrete or an asphalt surface, a sealed surface. It can be swept. A further condition is also recommended to ensure that the road between the entrance to the site and the junction with the A5 is swept, and a road sweeper is available to prevent mud on that road and going onto the A5. In terms of the impact of the development on the appearance of the area, It would, in the short term, have an impact. There is the requirement to remove a section of hedge to widen the access and to lower the height of the hedge. There's a recommendation for a condition to ensure the work is undertaken within the 2-year period, and the land would be restored to agriculture, and the boundary vegetation would be restored, replanted or allowed to regrow, which would re-establish the the appearance of the area. In terms of ecology, Natural England and the Environment Agency and our own ecology team were consulted on the application with no objections generated, subject to conditions. There's a requirement for the erection of fencing along the northern boundary, both to protect the watercourse itself from pollution and the vegetation along that side, and also ecology required fencing on the western side to prevent, there's no great crested newt habitat on the site itself, but there is in the proximity to the west of the site. So fencing needs to be erected along the western boundary just to make sure no machinery goes across into that area. On completion of works, the site would be restored after being regraded and returned to an agricultural use, and the field margins would be set aside to ensure that the site meets the requirement for a net biodiversity increase. In terms of drainage on the site is in flood zone 1. Following the regrading, the field would drain, as I said previously, gradually north along to the ditch along the northern boundary, but predominantly towards the eastern boundary to the north-south ditch, the swale, which would then drain northwards into the ditch along the northern boundary, which would prevent surface water draining onto Newton Lane. Our own flood team, as the lead local flood authority, have raised no objection. They have seen the details of the scheme, and there's a condition that it's recommended to be approved in accordance with their approved details. If I just finish going through the photos, this photo is showing the entrance to the site. I'm just stood actually just slightly to the south of the entrance. Access would come in here, and that's the visibility along Newton Lane looking towards the A5. This is looking the other way, looking south along Newton Lane. Again, I've taken a photo just last week just to show the difference, so the hedge height and with vegetation. That's the hedge in the winter, and it would be reduced in height. You can see actually there's a line where it has in the past been lower, so I think it can be lowered down without doing too much damage to it. And the hedge as it currently stands. The location of the fisheries is to the south, and routing would come along, as I say, up along the A5 and into Newton Lane. Showing the junction itself, Newton Lane coming towards the A5, a street view image, and I took a photo the other week, and it's showing the signage there for 7.5 tonne limit, and there had been signs put up obviously trying to dissuade vehicles from travelling, not associated with this site, but other vehicles from using that lane. And I understand that the new signage preventing HGV using that route has now gone up. That's a view just to show the sight line on the A5 looking westbound, and that's looking east. And I've taken an image here from satellite imagery. This was dated April 2020, and this shows the site at the fisheries to show the Bund area, as I say, in April 2020. And photos from my site visit there show this is the Bund area, and the working area on the site itself. It's material that would be moved from this site to Coton Farm. Highway safety team provided me with signage just to show what has gone up. These are very small images, sorry, but this is showing the location at Newton Lane, 2 signs to go up, and I think it was this sign that's to go up. And this is Newton Lane at present. There is mud on the road there at present, which I understand is coming from one of the fields locally, but this is why obviously a concern to ensure that the development, if approved, doesn't deliver mud onto the road. The proposed operation to regrade would meet the aims of policy to recycle waste materials and move them up the waste hierarchy. The regrading would improve the agricultural quality of the land to increase productivity. There would be an increase, net biodiversity increase achieved on completion of the development by the set-aside of the field margins. And it's considered that the objections raised relating to the adverse impacts of the development in terms of traffic, impact on local and residential amenity would be adequately overcome by the recommended conditions, which would be reasonable and enforceable. And the recommendation is for approval subject to those conditions.
Thank you, Sally. Right then, councillors, let's go on to our technical questions. Have we any right, Councillor Courage was first out of the traps there.
Thank you. Lovely. Could we have the picture of the proposed levels afterwards? There was like a side-on showing the ditch at one side, the north, and then the... Yes.
That's west-east. That's going across the field rather than north-south.
West on the left.
Yes. Newton Lane is on the east.
Okay. And can we have the other one?
The other one. So that's now north-south. So the existing drainage ditch is on this side.
Okay, I thought so. So for me, there's an awful lot of material going on that. You know, I don't see the advantage in a field being horizontal. I mean, most fields in the country are all over the place. If there's a drainage issue because the water can't get out, I can understand that. And there's several points to this. So is it really agriculturally necessary to stick all that earth on top? What's the benefit of not just, you know, the extra benefit of having all that extra earth rather than just flattening it off so it drains nicely? This seems to be, you know, massive overkill, which it may well be, and that might be because it's just a way of getting rid of the earth from the other side. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, you know, if this is taking things up the waste hierarchy. So what I'm really trying to find out, is this waste disposal, which it looks like to me, which is not necessarily a bad thing, or is it agricultural improvement?
The applicant is putting the proposal forward as an agricultural improvement of this land in terms of creating a more level surface that he can operate onto. It is actually, when you walk across it, quite a steep piece of land. I'm not sure my photos show entirely. And as I said, there are the excavated sites. There are quite deep hollows there. It does have the benefit of removing or moving waste from a site to this site. So it achieves actually two aims, but the applicant's purpose and the reason for the application is to improve agricultural productivity.
So if I can come back, do we as a council think that that's the reason? Do we think that is actually needed for an agricultural reason? Do we have agricultural...
Councillor, we have to consider the application that is in front of us.
Okay.
I think that's the important thing to remember. We always have to consider what's in front of us, not what we might think it is, but what's actually before us.
Okay, fine. And the other thing is, on a technical matter, when we're considering hours of work, now obviously the parish council have suggested, I think, 8 till 5, presumably for the benefit of their residents, 8 till 5 Monday to Friday, with nothing on a Saturday. You know, which I could go with. Do we have leeway, you know? I mean, I know we have standard practices, which is whatever it is on a Friday and a Saturday, but I think they must have been set in Victorian era when people worked on Saturday mornings rather than tried to enjoy their weekend. So, I mean, can we take a realistic modern-day view of imposing working hours?
The hours recommended are Rugby Borough Council standard hours. So they've been modified from the originally submitted to accord with what Rugby Borough generally would approve.
And can we reasonably modify them in this committee? I mean, can we say no Saturdays, for instance? I mean, is that challengeable? You know, would that stand up if somebody took it to to review the conditions?
I mean, yes, on previous committee we've amended ours, I think. So yes, we could do that. The implication of that, though, is that you then extend potentially the period of time that it takes to complete the operation. So it's a balance between how long it takes and the impact it has.
Absolutely.
So it's a half day on Saturday.
Yeah.
Right, let's have a look at my list of speakers. I've got Councillor Warwick, followed by Councillor Kettle, followed by Councillor Matetsky, followed by Councillor Simpson-Vince, and now Councillor Humphreys. Councillor Warwick.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I'll try and stay on questions and not stray into debate at this point in time. The point's already been made about the depth of this, 7 metres. My concerns are partly around flood. I know we're saying flood is not an issue from what's been assessed, but at the moment that is a very deep natural bowl that creates quite a storage of water at times of heavy rain. And we are right upon the A5 here, right upon the A5. HGV movements, I would want some sort of strong assurance about the routing plan of conditions if we were minded to approve this. Those HGV signs that have been shown have come out of my delegated budget. They have been required because there's been vehicles travelling through the village of Newton and being stuck in the village of Newton because it is impossible for them to negotiate the right-hand bends in that village. There have been vehicles damaged in the village, and it's reached such a point that we have funded these signs to try and stop this happening. So I would be extremely concerned if there was any possibility of any HGV vehicle from this operation going through the village of Newton and adding to the woes that we have worked very hard to resolve. And also the grading of the soil. Are we certain that the soil that is coming from this site is to a suitable agricultural grade for the volumes we're looking at to be put on this site? And what measures are we taking as a county to ensure that that soil is coming of a grade that is suitable for that site? What I'm sort of saying, I mean, the Chair of Newton and Biggin Parish Council is a highly respected former Chief Planning Officer, so I respect the comments that he has made in his representations here from the Council. And what we don't want is to resolve one problem and create another. So I would want to be sure that the soils coming from this site are of a grade to be deposited that are not going to cause anything other than an improvement to this site for agricultural purposes. So they're the initial points I will make on this, Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Do you want to comment on that?
Well, I can go through the various points. We've actually got the applicant with us as well, so I'm sure he would be able, he's going to speak later, but he would also be able to fill in any gaps if I'm not able to answer, I think. In terms, you mentioned first the depth at 3 metres and the drainage. I don't think it bogs down by the look of it, and you can see on sort of satellite imagery, it looks as if the tractor gets stuck in that area. The plough lines, you can see it has to go around it, and it's got gradually greener and unused. I don't know how much volume of water that actually holds, given the slope of it. So I think it probably is boggy, but I don't know that it's holding the volume of water. The drainage line there to the north would take the water away. So I don't know, by levelling the site, it's going to drain the water towards the east instead and use that drainage ditch along the side and then feed that through. It doesn't permeate through the soil surface here because it's underlying clay, so the geology is not such that it's draining through. It's surface water drainage here. So it's to be drained away to the east and then taken along that northern drainage ditch.
Okay.
In terms of the HGV movements and the routing, as I said, we've recommended a condition with signing as they leave the site to remind drivers. It's another reason for the condition for vehicles only to come from the fisheries, so there will only be a limited number of drivers operating who would be controlled by the applicant and by the fisheries to only use the appropriate route. They're local drivers and they should know that they will get stuck in Newton Village because, as you say, it's a 90-degree bend there that vehicles get stuck at. So there is the requirement for them to follow that, the routing as set out in the construction management plan and the condition. In terms of the grading the soil and the suitability of the soil, there would be a permit required from the Environment Agency. I think the applicant may have more information, but my understanding is there would be sampling. It wouldn't be by us, but the Environment Agency would be involved.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, we've got Councillor Kettle followed by Councillor Matetsky. Councillor Kettle, please.
Thank you. If the argument is soil improvement, what is the current agricultural grade of the soil that is currently there? You've mentioned it looks as though a tractor has got stuck. I think most fields in Warwickshire have got tractors got stuck over the last 2 winters. So tractors getting stuck is not really a relevant evidence. What is the source of the soil coming in? And I note from the planning application for the fisheries site, it is described as waste construction materials for the fisheries site. Now that is not necessarily topsoil. If the soil, firstly, I think you need to demonstrate to us how this activity is going to improve the soil. If it is grade 5 or 4, and you're bringing in appropriate topsoil, and it would be inappropriate to bring in non-matching soil to an area if we're bringing ironstone into a clay area or something would not be appropriate. So could you demonstrate how you've assessed that this will improve the soil quality? And if you tip a whole lot of soil on wet soil, you will just exacerbate the potential for getting a tractor stuck. So will land drains be being put in to ensure that it doesn't become impassable in winter? And what will the flow from those land drains be into the existing watercourses, and what impact will be there? So that's my first point. Secondly, whilst we are told that it will be better quality soil coming in, can we confirm how that is currently being tested, and what processes will be in the future to ensure that the soil brought in matches the existing soil, so that we have a consistent level of soil coming onto the site, which will result in the tested assumption that the soil will be improved? Because clearly over 2 years, construction waste materials could be anything. My third point was I do have concerns about the heights, but we'll deal with that in the debate area. But I'm reserved the right to come back with further questions, Mr. Chairman, if I may, later on.
Well, we'll see if we can fit you in, Councillor Kettle. It's simple as that. Okay.
Well, I'll park it there then.
Thank you. You'll park it. Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Matetsky, please.
Thank you, Chair. So my questioning's in line with Councillor Kerridge's sort of questioning. I'm struggling to see why this is necessary. There's been no mention of the current quality of the soil, which I think Councillor Kettle was saying that any soil brought onto the site should be better than what's already there. And the bit that I'm struggling with here, and I'm not a farmer, so I really don't know, but common sense would say to me, if I wanted to improve the agricultural quality of a field, I would want to put topsoil of X depth, whether it be 1 foot or a metre, and I just put a even 1 metre spread across the site. Because at the moment, you've got the one end of the site, which I think is the southern end of the site, is going to basically have nothing, whereas the other end of the site's going to have several metres in it. We're talking 7 metres or 5.5 metres, something. So to me, it doesn't make sense to actually put so much soil at one end and so little on the other, because all you're going to get is very poor productivity in a good proportion of the field and good productivity at the other end of the field. So it just, to me, it doesn't make sense to level it and use so much soil. That's the bit I can't get my head around.
Do you want to have a go at that one, Sally?
I can try, yes. Current soils in the location, I mean, I've taken this from the agricultural land classification, are grade 2, which is very good. There's a range of soils there. Grade 3, good to moderate, and that's to the north. That's beyond the trees to the north. And grade 4 to the east. It is an area all around that has had gravel extraction, and not everywhere has been restored. So I think soils in various pockets are quite poor. I don't know the details. I'm sure the applicant will be able to answer some of this more proficiently than I can. In terms of the depth of the soil, it has been used for agriculture and I think for arable in the past, so there is a depth of soil there. It's mostly the land raising to change the profile, to make it more level, and they are using materials that are currently waste elsewhere to be imported in. They're not necessarily going to be of the same, they're coming, I think, from the locality, from building sites and construction sites. Materials are not entirely topsoil, but they will be some topsoils, and then they can be screened and mixed to create a product that is suitable for this location.
So this isn't anything to do about improving agricultural quality, it's actually just levelling the land for some reason.
It's levelling the land, but then, yes, the topsoil will be of a quality that is productive for agriculture as well, yes.
Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor Simpson-Vince next.
Thank you.
Councillor Humphreys will be after that.
It's coming back to Councillor Kerridge's point about the hours of operation. In 1.4 of the report, it just talks about working Monday to Friday, but then condition 23 is including Saturdays. Now, I get that that's Rugby Borough Council's hours, but if the applicant's only saying Monday to Friday, can we take the Saturday out? Because they're obviously not planning on being there on a Saturday.
The information initially, yes, in the planning statement did say Monday to Friday. When I was there on site, on my site visit, we were then talking about it and they said, well, yeah, but maybe some Saturdays, and if the weather is good, then they would want to do it. I would prefer to see, I think it's a better recommendation to see some control over the Saturday, and that it is allowed and it's controlled, than saying, you know, we're not going to get our application completed in the time a year down the line saying, okay, please can we now do Saturdays? I would rather see the control throughout the operation. Those are the recommended hours, or the regular hours that Rugby Borough are happy with.
So does it say in the current application that they want Saturdays, or does it say Monday to Friday in the application?
It actually changed, so they are proposing some Saturdays as well.
Okay. Just a quick second point. On 1.6, it talks about having space for a tipper truck to come off the road if the gates are closed, which kind of raises a little alarm of like, presumably the gates would only be closed when the site isn't operating. Would there be occasions when the gates are closed during operating hours? I'm just worried about, again, it comes to the hours of operation. Are we going to have tipper trucks turn up at 6 o'clock in the morning, as we do with development sites where we get HGVs turn up waiting for the site to open? I just wonder if that's where that could be going.
This is a site that they're only coming from 1.7 kilometres to the south, so it's a much shorter journey.
Yeah.
And I imagine that the gates will be closed because they wouldn't want fly tipping and things. So there will be a security gate there to ensure it's only open at appropriate times. I don't think vehicles are going to be coming in huge numbers in a convoy of vehicles, such that if there's space for one vehicle to park, I think that's probably adequate off the road. And the applicant lives on site. I mean, again, it may be more information that Mr. Rees can provide.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I've got Councillor Humphreys, followed by the second bite for Councillor Kettle.
Thank you very much. My question really is about, the road has already been reduced to 7.5 tonnes because of defending problems in Newton. And it is only a short distance. But my experience with it's quite a busy road. That's a quick way into and out of the bottom end of Rugby, so it gets used more than people realise. But also, it's the nature. There's 3,500, almost 3,500 HGVs going to go along there, 8 till 5. Is there any mitigation or any protection to the county? Because from my experience at all development like this, is the sides of the roads get quite severely damaged, and eventually when it's all done, everybody goes away and the county picks up the bill. So will we be looking at what we can do to protect that road and protect us in the future for having to pick up any bill to repair the roads? Thank you.
I didn't have any objection from Highways actually, or comments on those grounds, so I'm not aware of anything. No,
Well,
they haven't.
can I just say, I've got up at my top end of where I live, up in the north there, we've got problems where there was no objection from the Highways, and now we're looking at how we can do something about fixing the roads where there's been detours, etc. like that. So all I'm just saying, those vehicles do tend to migrate off the road onto the verges, and if those photos that you showed, you could actually see where they'd already climbed the verges. You could see the tyre trucks. There may have been farm vehicles or whatever, but they actually had come off the road. And I just, all of a sudden, it's thousands of pounds worth of damage in the future. Thank you.
Councillor Kettle, followed by Councillor Feeney, please.
Thank you. You mentioned, I think, that there have been previously quarrying or other activities in this area. And you can see on the other side of the road a clear bank which would suggest that soil had been removed historically in the area, and I'm sure many of us are aware of many other quarries where there is a definitive line between soil, ground that's been worked and ground that has not been worked. Looking at the photographs and looking at the actual area, it doesn't seem to have any definition of where the soil had been extracted or whatever had been extracted was extracted. What evidence do you have to confirm this has been a historic quarry site, and which part of the field was used for quarrying? And I'm going to follow that up with, if there had been stone extracted from this site, one would normally expect to see the topsoil having been removed, stored somewhere close by. Do you have any evidence as to where the former topsoil would have been saved before the quarrying activities had been used to remove the stone underneath?
The information I have, there is no planning history for this site in terms of extraction. I have walked across the site and I was accompanied by the applicant, and he, in discussions, informed me that it was, I think his grandfather in the 50s was the site was part of the excavation. Now, I don't know if that's correct, but it's a very long time ago. Going back to the photo I've got here, the area of the Greatest Hollow is in this sort of area, and as you walk across it, you can see that the levels drop. that's the only evidence I have. It looks like historical.
But it might be just a natural landscape bowl.
It could be, but it was deeper than that. The whole field, I agree, is dipped, but it looks like in areas there are pockets of much deeper. Yeah, given the geology locally, that looked like the logical explanation.
Thank you. Councillor Feeney, please.
Thank you. Sorry, mine are quite some simple questions, so apologies for the simplicity of my questions. But
Simple is good.
Thank you. Knowing that bit of the A5 fairly well, I was interested in the discussions in the paper around visibility and things like that in terms of the sight lines for drivers. And I'm guessing that hedge height reduction, that can only be done out of nesting season, so there is a kind of time limit on when that can be done. Also, what happens when it grows? Are we going to check the hedge heights at any point, I guess, is one of my questions. And the other question I had around visibility is weather can, particularly in our bit of the world, Adrian, seems to be quite heavy sometimes, and that affects visibility. Will there be any conditions or any thought about what happens when we've got heavy rain or things like that in terms of operation? Because there's nothing in the document I can see around that.
There's a condition relating to dust, actually, which is requiring that they don't undertake operations at a time when dust will be sort of blown around. In terms of rain, no, there isn't a condition. But, as I say, it's likely this operation to be undertaken in drier periods and in the summer, which was the reason for ensuring there's a maximum number of vehicles, that it doesn't... there will be a higher volume of traffic during those dry months for that very reason. They're not necessarily going to want to be delivering and grading wet soil across the site.
No, that's what I just wondered, because it was a very specific 215 metres, and I guess we all know that as weather gets worse, visibility reduces, doesn't it? And I just wondered if there was any consideration.
I mean, that's a standard sightline. That's a recommendation from both the Highway Authority and as Highways England and our own Highway Authority. So, yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. That concludes my list of speakers. Can I then move on to hear, firstly, the speakers, and as we heard at the beginning of the meeting, Mr Davis has sent a statement in, and Matthew Williams is now going to read that.
Thank you. As I say, I'm reading this on behalf of Ian Davis. My name is Ian Davis. I hold a degree in Bachelor of Arts with honours, and I'm a member of the Royal Town Planning Institute. I'm chair of Newton and Biggin Parish Council. I had hoped to attend the meeting today, but unfortunately I'm unable. I'm grateful that this statement has been read out on my behalf. I'd also like to thank Mrs Panayi for assistance and advice during her assessment of the proposals. The Parish Council has no objections to the principle of the development, but has serious misgivings about its implementation. In places, the imported material will be 21 feet deep. Neither WCC or the applicant has been able to explain whether this is justified. Concern 1. Is this amount of fill necessary for agriculture? The 135,000 tonnes of soil to be tipped on the site will come from the fisheries, also known as the Riley site. Neither WCC nor the applicant has been able to define how much material is available at the fisheries site. Concern 2. How will any shortfall be addressed? The fisheries, a reclamation site, has operated outside planning control for years, and WCC has failed to take action. A visit by officers last year revealed that a watercourse had been blocked and that bunds were dangerous. Enforcement action has finally been taken, but an appeal places this in abeyance. It is being recommended that all must be inert. Concern 3. Who will be responsible for inspecting material? Surely this can't be the responsibility of the applicant. Does WCC have the resources to undertake this task? The Coton Farm site is something of a mess. There is a lot of mud on the highway. WCC Highways have been advised, but the problem remains. Importing 135,000 tonnes of soil has the potential to make a bad situation worse. Concern 4. Given WCC's inaction, what confidence can there be that action will be taken in the event of more mud being deposited on the highway? It is intended that all trucks travelling between the fisheries and Coton Farm should do so via the A5. Given the access arrangements at the fisheries, the drivers of the returning trucks may find it more convenient to travel through Newton Village. There is already a problem with HGVs attempting to pass through the village, contrary to restrictions. Despite the best efforts of County Council of Warwick, WCC has not addressed these points. Concern 5. What evidence can be placed on WCC's ability to control vehicle routing? In conclusion, 135,000 tonnes of soil will come from a site where breaches of planning control have remained unaddressed by WCC over many years. Action has finally been taken, but is subject to an appeal. There is already mud all over the road at Coton Farm site, and HGVs are using local roads contrary to restrictions, both of which WCC has not addressed. Many of the 30 conditions attached to the permission fall to WCC to assess, inspect and enforce. Given WCC's failure to address planning and highway issues, the Parish Council has grave misgivings at the ability to control the development. It is respectfully requested that members of the Regulatory Committee need to satisfy themselves that WCC has the resources, commitment and appetite to ensure that all of the conditions are complied with before granting planning permission. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. Can I then go to Mr. Rees, who is the applicant, please?
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, councillors, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Selwyn Rees and I am the applicant with my wife Emma. I'm a farmer and an agronomist, so anything agricultural...
Mr. Rees, can I just get you to move your microphone a bit closer?
How's that? Is that better?
You're coming across as soft and gentle, and I couldn't
Okay.
quite hear you.
Not a problem.
That's it, thank you.
I'm an agronomist and a farmer, so anything agricultural I've pretty much done in my life. So my grandfather bought Coton Farm in 1948, and I inherited it in 2013 from my mother. My grandfather sold the gravel in the late 50s and it was extracted in the early 60s. So it's not a natural pan that has been dug, and I've got the contract with Shell Gravel Company. There's been no remediation. So the topsoil was stripped and stockpiled. Then the sand and gravel was dug out and they just pushed it back in, and it is really difficult. So the sprayers we use at the moment have 30-metre booms. So if you look at the gradient on that site, you can't actually get the sprayer round the field now because the gradients are too steep. I've worked and lived, and I was born at Caves Inn on A5 on the farm. And I've been there most of my life, although I have work away and I do live away at the moment. We've struggled to crop that field, and it has been either a long-term set-aside, fallow, or it has been in a countryside stewardship scheme on and off. So it's difficult to farm in its current condition. I've long held the view, having actually worked the field for a long time, that I would like to re-level it and reinstate it to the levels it was previously at before it was dug. And this has never really arisen until now. The only material that I'm happy to go onto that site is in a topsoil as classified by the Environment Agency. They will be checking, to get the permits to do it, they will be checking every load and sampling it, so to make sure that that is correct. And I think that, I would like to be able to pass the farm on to my children so that they can farm. So it's not something, I'm not here today and gone tomorrow. This is a long-term thing that I would like to do. Just going on to some of the points that were raised by the councillors, as I said, it's not a natural bowl. It's man-made, it was dug, and it was, if you did this today, you'd have to have a reinstatement plan. HGVs through Newton, I agree it is a real problem, and I see it happen. I see them go past the farm quite often. And it is something that putting signs at the end hopefully will help, but I don't know what else you're going to do to stop them going down there. I don't think the lorries will take any other alternative routes and go through Newton because they are all local drivers and they all live either in Newton or around the locality, and they know where those bends are. And I think quite a few of them drink in the local pub as well. So improving the land is all about the levelling out of it. So it is putting, it is not, so the topsoil will be stripped off before we tip anything in there, and that will be put back on afterwards. And so it was trying to reinstate it rather than tipping waste in there to get rid of the waste. It's about trying to reinstate it to as it was previously. And if you go onto Google Maps and look, so you can go back, I think, to 1906 or somewhere like that with some of the black and white maps on Google, and you can see the difference in there from between them, so you can see. In my opinion, it's because of the waterlogging that happens in the bottom. The grade of the agricultural land there is, and it has been quarried, and there is a real big difference between unquarried land and quarried land. And I walk several fields around Showell that have been quarried. The depth in there is to regrade it to a suitable level. The 7.5 tonne limit on Newton Lane was there, but the road was improved when they built the M6, so they did all the culverts under the road and they improved it up to there, but I could understand why you'd put a 7.5 tonne limit on a road with the S-bends in the middle of Newton. It's very sensible. Yes, I've got the contract with Showell Gravel for the extraction. Hedgerows can be trimmed out of season, so I'm not allowed to cut any hedges until the...
How long has this gentleman had?
Sorry.
You just finish your paragraph, sir. That's
not a problem. Thank you. Hedgerows cutting, so I can't start cutting till the 1st of September. I've grown the hedgerows up, which is good agricultural practice because of wildlife retention. And I guess that's me done.
Thank you very much. I think you need to thank Mr. Cole for your extra time there. Thank you. Okay. Right. Now, Mr. Rees is here. Are any of the committee members wishing to ask a question of Mr. Rees? And by a short head, Councillor Matetsky is first.
Thank you, Chair. So, Mr. Rees, very simple question. If this was a level site and you wanted to improve the site for agricultural reasons, how much depth of topsoil would you actually be putting onto the site?
So topsoil would be normally, depending on where you are, if you're in riverbeds, then you can have quite large depths of topsoil, but normally I'd look to be about 8 to 12 inches really on average of topsoil on there. But what you've got to remember is that they're importing screen topsoil, which is classified by the Environment Agency. So it's not what you would imagine the black topsoil would be, but you can also get some subsoil in there as well, which is what they don't, where they've dug out of sites, and that is classified as, the Environment Agency classifies as topsoil, but it's not what I would call agriculturally topsoil.
So I can understand the problem you've got with the natural dish in there, for want of a better word, because things been extracted. So if you stuck if you went to the northern end of the site, which is the lowest end of the site, and said, right, okay, we'll put your 12 inches, so let's give you 12, because you said 8 to 12, let's give you 12 inches at that end of the site, and say, right, we'll just draw a straight line from there to the other end of the site, which would be the southern end of the site, and we'll let you infill that, and then that gets rid of all your problems regarding the 30-foot boom and all that, because you've now got a level site. Okay, it's sloping, but at least it's level. And it's going to save you a hell of a lot of money in putting a lot of soil in somewhere where it's not really needed.
It would still flood because it's below the level of the stream. So the water would come out of the stream and in and flood the field. So I still wouldn't be able to farm it. So all I'm trying to do is restore it to roughly where the previous level was. So it is a case of trying to build it back up to where the field historically was.
So you're saying it used to be flat?
It used to be relatively flat, yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Simpson-Vince.
thank you. A lot of that area has been extracted. I just wondered, because you've got quite a large farm, were there other parts of the farm that had extraction and have been restored? Are there any areas adjacent to this one where that has happened?
Yes, alongside the A5, there is a field, the Watling Street field there. Now, that has had sand and gravel extracted from it, and it hasn't been restored either. So that floods a lot as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kerridge.
Thank you. Hello. Hello there. It's really about the hours of work, I suppose. I'd get to. Obviously, there's concern over the neighbours, having to listen to all the trucks going on, all day, every day, for 2 years. It's a long time, so I sympathise with that, and I'm sure you do too, as a local person. Now, for me, Saturdays are sacrosanct, and I can kind of put up with a weekday in general. We've heard, the figures are based on a Monday to Friday that we have in our report. You've got the maximum of 20 a day, so that, on a dry day, be it winter or summer, you can really go for it. It seems to me that you could do this Monday to Friday. Any comments on that?
Well, you're talking to a farmer here, so I work 7 days a week. But,
yeah, forgive me, I'm sorry, yes.
but understood, and I could quite understand why people wouldn't want, but I think any work done on a Saturday would be Saturday mornings generally, because even the drivers want their weekends off. So, and it's not, it's just when it's dry weather, so we've been through 2 of the wettest winters on record. The wettest winter I've never known has just gone. As I think one of your colleagues stated, that there's plenty of tractors being stuck across Warwickshire in the past 12 months. And so if you do get a dry period, then you do want to turn around and try and get it done, because there will be large times when there will be no lorries going up and down there Monday to Friday or on a Saturday, because it will be too wet to do anything. So if we're not careful, we can't get it done because of the weather, then we'll have to look at turning around and saying we might need an extra time to do it. And I don't really want to do that. I'd prefer it to be done as quickly and efficiently as possible, and then we can finish the site and pack up and carry on farming.
Thank you. There we are. Thank you, Councillor Kettle.
Yes, I'm slightly confused. The application says that this is about the importation of topsoil, and what you've described earlier on is a stripping off of the existing topsoil and bringing in waste materials from the site, and then, as I understood it, putting the topsoil back on. Now that is a different operation from filling up to actually removing, laying down waste and putting topsoil over the top. I'm also, I can see from Google Maps, I'd looked at it already, and I looked at it again whilst you were explaining, I can see there is one small circle where clearly there are ruts, which I think the officer described earlier on, in one little patch. But that does not incorporate the entire field. And if there is a boggy patch, every farm has boggy patches. I have to say I'm a farmer and I have boggy patches. And there are ways to drain subsoil, improve runoff into the natural watercourses. That doesn't involve raising the entire field, except for the margins by the road and the far hedge, by up to 7 metres. So can we establish, are we importing topsoil and therefore laying it over the existing topsoil, or are we employing builder's waste? And what is the, I did ask a question earlier on, what the soil classification is. Unfortunately, the signal isn't very good in here for some reason, so I have tried to look at it on here, but the officer has described it's most of the soil around here is grade 2 or 3, which is the average for most agricultural land across the whole of the UK, And what I have been able to see is your area is within 2 and 3 grades. So it would suggest there is really quite a good standard quality. It is all about the boggy patch and resolving that rather than there's something wrong with your topsoil.
The actual topsoil...
Thank you, Councillor Kettle. You got there in the end.
Sorry.
Thank you very much.
So, yes, you're right. So you can remediate wet patches, but the trouble I've got there, if you look at the slide with the contours on there, you'll see that the bottom is below the level of the ditch. So I'd have to install a pump to electrically pump the water out of the field. And I think I'd be pumping groundwater there to try and, remove it from the field. So it's just virtually impossible to turn around and dry that field up unless you turn around and build up that soil so that you've got a gradient you can drain it to. But topsoil, the topsoil is, I believe, is classified by the Environment Agency. They've got a classification for it, so it's called screened topsoil is what is being imported.
Okay.
It's the topsoil that was originally there, but the classification for agricultural land is if it hadn't been quarried. Because it's been quarried, then you'll find that the classification would go down rapidly for that patch of land.
Any other questions for Mr. Rees? No? Good. Okay. Thank you very much. Right then, members, we now get into this stage where we are going to debate the matter and make a decision. And first with his pen up was Councillor Warwick. Councillor Warwick.
Thank you, Chair. Okay. I'm not massively keen on what's before us. I'll say that now. And I have, like the parish council in Newton, concerns. However, I'm also a pragmatist. There is an enforcement notice on the site that is going to be exporting these materials. So those materials will be leaving the fisheries site because there's an enforcement notice, albeit appealed at the moment, that says that that bund needs to be reduced. We have 1.2 kilometres away a site that can receive these materials. Therefore, do we take the opportunity today to grant this permission to bring these soils this distance up the A5 and deposit them on this site? Or are we going to turn this down and the materials will still move? It's just where to? I tend to side with the comments made by Councillor Davis today. Whilst I don't object in principle to this application, the key to this is around the enforcement of the conditions that are being recommended by the officers. And those conditions to me are that the soil should be of a suitable graded quality that goes onto this site, that the conditions around flooding should be checked, looked into, and we should be darn sure before we do anything else that there is not going to be a flooding issue. And absolutely, crucially and fundamentally, that no HGVs go through the village of Newton. They make that short turn off the A5 and into this site and do not go through that village and cause further heartache to the residents of Newton, because we've worked to get these signs in to get this resolved, and I don't want to see anything that's going to sort of jeopardise that. So I tend to take the view that Newton and Biggin Parish Council take, that they're not objecting but want to see that these conditions are monitored and enforced, and I would like an absolutely cast iron assurance from officers today that they will be monitoring, that they will move quickly to deal with any breaches on this, and that there's not going to be any comeback that will be ringing in my ears as the division councillor for the area around conditions not being adhered to. So I have to say, from my point of view, whilst not particularly excited by this, I can see, as a pragmatist, that there are advantages to this application. So that is my contribution to the debate, Chair, and I hope that sort of reminds that we are here to judge this on its planning merits and on
Thank you for
nothing
that.
else. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Mills next, followed by Councillor Kettle. I don't know why, it's because I was thinking about coffee, I think. Councillor Kettle. Councillor Mills is first, please.
Oh, right. Thank you very much. Just like to say one thing, Mr. Rees. You work 7 days a week, and I think mostly councillors do as well. Well, I do. Yes. I mean, look, I looked at all the parish's objections, and great to hear Adrian put a strong case forward. I'm just looking at page 35 of 5.50. The landowner advised that the field subject to the application, anyway, it goes on, but I think it's going to be a good thing, is restoring it back to agricultural land. All we see at the moment is land being built on, across the country. So I'm really pleased to see that we're restoring this to agricultural land. So for me, Mr. Chairman, I would go for the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Are you proposing the officer's recommendation, Councillor Mills?
I'd propose that, Mr. Chairman.
You are proposing, thank you very much. Does that find a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Kenyok. Thank you. Right, Councillor Kettle.
I understand Councillor Mills' comment on that and would support him in that respect. I think I do have a problem with this. It is highly unnatural to have a dead flat surface. It is also, if you have a dead flat surface, you have no ability for the water to run off. And the vast majority of all agricultural land has some slope somewhere allowing water, and that is part of the natural features of our landscape. We're not America, the great flatlands in the centre. We don't have flat fields. Occasionally we do in Cambridgeshire, I suppose. I have a problem with the working hours. I know this committee approved an application last time it sat, which had different working hours to this one. I think they were 8 to 6, the Edge Hill Quarry. So I think we need to consider why we are giving 7:30 on this one, and again on Saturdays when farmers accepting and councillors, the majority of people are not working on Saturdays. I think this is overkill. I think there is a significant problem, as the division member has pointed out, at a local storage depot where they are suffering enforcement problems. And that enforcement problem is their own fault, because they've presumably taken too much on and are now trying to sort out a problem because they've been told they got to. And just around the corner, there's a little bit of a hole to fill. And farmers have regularly filled little holes with a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of the other. But the scale of this is completely out of the normal filling a bit of a hole with a little bit of something. So, had it been for a gentle contouring to fill the specific wet patch, which is clearly identifiable, to enable Mr. Rees to actively cultivate that bit of ground. But I do notice on the Google Maps and Google Earth that it has been cultivated, it has been an arable crop, it is not redundant land, it has been used, although it is wet from time to time. And therefore, I think this is overkill. It really concerns me. It will not be a natural feature. It will be a very artificial feature in the landscape, and that is not something which our planning policies seek to enhance or develop. And therefore, if you was to come back with a smaller scale, which actually focused on the one problem, and we helpfully have the contours online or on screen in front of us, which was to address the specific problem in the top semicircle next door to what is currently the track, I would have complete sympathy with this application. But I cannot have sympathy with an application of this size and scale, given that the source material is construction waste, not topsoil. If, however, the committee is minded to go forward with this, I think that we need to have a very rigorous control and recording that every movement onto the site is topsoil of an equivalent or better quality from that which already exists. And that it is not used as an opportunity for what is described as waste construction material, which is the current neighbouring site is used for, is not being brought onto this site along with a little bit of topsoil, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. I think, Mr. Rees, I'm going to use chairman's privilege here and just ask you. I'm sure when you were speaking, you did actually say that the lorry loads that are coming from your site are going to be individually inspected, or am I over-egging the pudding there?
I believe so for the permits for the Environment Agency, and the Environment Agency class the loads coming in as screened topsoil, and it's the Environment Agency that classify that. It's not me saying it's topsoil coming in. It is what they classify as topsoil, and that screened topsoil.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that after what I'm sorry, I've lost my place. Councillor Phelps, next.
Thank you. Thank you. I've kept quite quiet. I'm sorry, I'm not a farmer. I know absolutely nothing about farming, apart from the fact I like to walk around the edge of lovely fields. So I really don't understand farming, but I do think I know my planning.
Yes.
And I've looked at this, as I always do, with my planning hat on. It does say under 1.2 that there has been a topographical survey, and that the maximum void to regrade to a more horizontal level would be, and that gives just the totals. So that's how it's been worked out, how much is needed to make it a horizontal level. I do have sympathy about Saturday morning work, and we did, Councillor Kettle's right, we did in the last application say no Saturday working, and I would fully support if somebody wished to have had that amended to be Monday to Friday. It is a local site that it's coming from. If it's dry weather, you'll get as many as the 20 journeys done in that day or in that week. So I would support if somebody wished to back me on no Saturday workings. So the Environmental Agency are the body that deal with the what the soil, etc. is. It's not the County Council, in my opinion. I may be right or wrong, but I think it's the Environmental Agency that actually deal with that. So I will be supporting this because I believe the planning reasons given, and as I always do, I always look for reasons to say no first before I say yes, I will give. And I think the planning reasons given are consistent and appropriate. So just on the Saturday working, if somebody would agree to not having Saturday working.
Okay, well, we'll come back to that. Councillor Simpson-Vince is next.
Thank you. I agree with Councillor Phelps. There's very little in terms of planning reasons to say no to this. So, you know, it's then we work with what we've got. In terms of whether it should be a flat surface, at our previous committee, we had a very long discussion about restoring a site when it was going to be finished and making sure it was a flat surface. So this has been a quarried site for gravel extraction. Why wouldn't we make it a flat surface afterwards when we demand that of everybody else? Equally, in terms of a flat surface, as someone who's just tried to install a brand new lawn in their back garden with the best will in the world, it started flat, it rained all winter, it's not flat now. So, you know, this field, whilst it might start flat, in a few years' time will have lumps and bumps in it as well, and it won't be flat. In terms of the Saturdays, the route, as long as this isn't going through the village of Newton, which, you know, we're relying on local drivers to know, please don't do that, and any time a lorry does go through Newton, Councillor Warwick will phone me to complain about it. So you know, please don't put them through Newton. It goes down the A5, which has heavy volumes of traffic every day. It then turns off and goes past one house. So we're trying to work out a Saturday schedule for one house, and I guess it's going to be what weight we put on that as to how strongly we feel about the Saturday working. I think I would rather that we got it done and over with and finished than delayed that process necessarily for the sake of that Saturday. So given that this doesn't go through villages, it doesn't go through massively built up areas, on weight of balance, I would stay with what we've got at the moment, but I'll see where everyone else is. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Clark, please.
Thank you. Being relatively new, obviously, and not being a farmer, I'm coming at this from a fairly neutral position insofar as we have to determine the application as it is before us. Correct. I hear what Councillor Phelps said in relation to the timings, particularly around Saturdays. I'm aware that natural construction techniques do allow Saturday workings in the usual sense, and I'm very mindful of what Councillor Simpson-Vince has said, given the flexibility that may be there or may be required to ensure that we get this done sooner rather than later. So I'm minded to go with the application as it's set out, including the Saturdays mornings, with the conditions that Councillor Warwick's stipulated. I think they're essential to put into the application and to give the permission. So I'd be minded to go with the application as with those amendments, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Matetsky, please, followed by Councillor Kerridge.
Thank you, Chair. Is it okay if I ask a question? If we granted this, are we actually setting a precedent for every farmer to turn around and say, well, actually, I have a field which is slightly on a slope and it'd be far more productive to be level, and therefore I want to level my field? Is that something we're leaving ourselves
You're not
open to?
setting a precedent, Councillor. You're checking each application is considered on its merits. So you're not actually setting a precedent if we were to agree this. Okay.
Thank you.
Councillor Kerridge.
Thank you very much. I think a lot of the struggle we've had today, let's start with the positives. The report has been constructed very well in that the conditions are well explained and I think quite stringent. So hopefully that gives local people some happiness. They look like very good conditions to me. I've thought about the timing. I'm going back towards agreeing that actually Saturdays is fine. So I'd go with all the conditions as recommended. What we struggled with, many of us have struggled with, is the agricultural reasoning behind this, which I don't see in the report, and I think we need it, obviously, in retrospect, to have laid out in a lot more detail, to put our minds at rest, perhaps. And, you know, one could quite easily, you know, I've hovered around, you know, suggesting that we can't make a decision because we haven't got the right information, and that we should go away and get that information before we make a judgment on this. Hovered, but come down in favour of this recommendation.
Thank you very much. Right, councillors, a couple of things on this. Firstly, Ian Marriott, our solicitor, did point out to me, because it was mentioned during the debate, about the level of the site, and it did actually say, I can't remember what page it was. Here we go. It says in 5.75, the site currently falls with an average gradient of 1 to 26, which after regrading would build to a predominantly west to east fall between 1 to 25 and 1 to 35, and a fall of 1 to 1,500, 1 to 500 in the south to north direction. So there is going to be a gradient. It's not going to be flat. It's certainly not going to be a mill pond. So just wanted to clarify that. I've listened to the speak. I was, when Councillor Phelps suggested about the water, I do think, on balance though, I'm favouring getting it done quickly. I would say to you, my thoughts are, and one of the other speakers mentioned it quite clearly, I don't believe there's a planning reason to object to this application at all. It's quite simple from that point of view. What I would say, I'd like to do two things. Firstly, I'd like to say to Mr. Rees, you've heard what the committee have said. I'm going to ask you, I've got no legal powers, I'm going to ask you to promise me, Mr. Rees, that there isn't going to be any people turning through the little village next door, because I will come after you, purely and simply, because you're now going to promise me that isn't going to happen. Because you've got your ward county councillor there, and he won't be very happy, and he'll come after you as well. You're lying in the road. That sounds like a very... look, okay, thank you for that. I'm grateful for the debate. Particularly, I think we should congratulate Sally on her excellent presentation as well. Right, it has been proposed. It's been proposed by Councillor Mills and seconded by Councillor Kenyock that planning permission be granted in accordance with the recommendations as set out. Those in favour of that, please show. And against? Abstentions? Thank you very much. That is carried by 11 votes to 0. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed for everybody who's taken part in that debate. We now move on to our next item on the agenda, which is item 4. And the first is to members of the public be excluded from the meeting for the items mentioned below on the grounds that their presence would involve the disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972. So I'm sorry, everybody.